Welcome everyone to this episode of Blood, Sweat, and Balance Sheets. We're super excited to have you here. Today, my guest is Razak Jallow, who's our CFO. Thank you, Razak. Super happy to have you. Plethora of experience. I don't feel that I am worthy of being the one to interview him, but really excited to be here.
I'm really excited to be here too. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Great. Razak, people have probably already heard your background with your previous interview with myself and Mike, but if you wouldn't mind just taking a couple seconds to just give us people a little introduction about yourself and your background, that'd be super helpful.
Absolutely. Razak Jallow, CFO of Flowcast. I've been tech finance my whole career with different business models, whether that be Adobe and the shift from perpetual boxes to subscription, Apple hardware sales, Lending Club, and Looker before its exit to Google. So very much in the tech finance area, and I've seen a lot of different business models that I'm always excited by. So thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome. Love that. And I think we're going to dive into a few of those for this conversation. Today, what we really want to talk about is just the uncertain market and what can CFOs and different accounting finance executives and leaders do to kind of navigate an uncertain market, right? There's talk of a recession in the horizon. You know, I'm not an economist. Razak is not an economist. So we're not here to really make any kind of market predictions, but we are here to talk about what are some things we can do to kind of navigate those turbulent waters. And I think Razak even has some great suggestions on what we've done at Flowcast when there wasn't uncertain waters, and how some of those same decision-making tools are really helpful regardless of what the economic condition is today. So with that, I think just to lay out a few facts that are going on today in the marketplace is, inflation has been rampant for a long time. The Fed is having a hard time keeping it under control. There was talk recently of them going a full point of an interest rate hike. They only stuck to 0.75. But there's a lot of uncertainty there. Stagflation is something that people have a concern about, and then just a recession in general. So regardless of where you think the market's going, it is uncertain and it's a turbulent day to day, which is stressful enough for me, not as a CFO. Razak, for you, how has that really shifted your conversations internally from, where you were maybe 9 months ago to where your conversations are today with leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first, just acknowledging how stressful uncertainty can be. You think of the hierarchy of needs, and anytime you're a company and maybe growth isn't what you thought it would be, and you start looking really closely at that cash balance and making sure you're good there too, it can be stressful, not just for finance teams, but for the entire company. And so one of the things that we've always done in the good times and the bad is always have both high and low scenario modeling. So for us, when things are changing, either for better or for worse, it's not a giant shift or it's not as stressful because we've already had a plan to what we would do in those scenarios. I think the things I emphasize are maybe a little bit beyond that. I think a lot of people are aware of having multiple scenarios, but the importance of how the entire company will look to finance and accounting for leadership and comfort in these times. If the CFO and the controller are extremely panicked because they didn't prepare for this, that can be a lot more stressful for the company, a lot more uncertainty. And with uncertainty comes more churn, more employees wanting to leave because they're not sure about the future, more stress, more people thinking about things outside their job that might impact them. And so having that plan, having that confidence, knowing that your close went well and you have a plan going forward on what cash will inspire confidence through the rest of the company. So I would say something really important for teams to get through things when they're worried about something is to have done all that research and that scenario modeling and have your close all buttoned up so that you feel really good about where you are and where you're going.
Right. I really like that. I kind of took away a couple things. You said a lot of things, but I took away a few things, which is, signaling is really important, right? And the signal from the office of the CFO, from yourself to the controller to probably whoever's leading your finance side, or any other different kind of functions within the CFO office is really important to the broader organization. but it's not just signaling. It needs to be like true confidence, right? You need to be backing up and say, well, don't put on a good face, like, make sure that you can also, stand up to that. But it also sounds like there has been already a real shift in focus of what you say in the conversations and getting you involved in conversations as a CFO.
Yeah, I think anytime you're going through tons of growth, people always focus on what's next to do. And so, oh, I want to expand in this geography. I need headcount for that. I want to add this feature of the system. I need something for that. Always kind of take a look back and say, what are we doing that could be done better? If I had to do the same things next year with 20% less, how would I do that? And what you'll find is it forces you to think of more efficient ways to do things. And then after you do that exercise, you come out thinking, well, why don't I just do this anyways? Even if I'm growing 40, 60, 70%, if this is a good idea, why wouldn't I just do it? And so every year we go through that exercise of, what's the 20% that we don't need to do anymore that we could do better? And that helps us really just make sure, I call it good company hygiene, but helps us make sure we're always making the best investments and looking at everything that maybe was a given in the past with a critical eye.
Not assuming that you'll always have the same next year, right? Just saying, regardless, as you said, if it's going well or not, if you can do better, then just do it, right? It's better for you, your career, for the company. Everybody kind of wins. And it's not trying to do more with less by not investing. It's just simply changing processes to improve yourself and your execution. Is that what I'm understanding?
Absolutely. And just like everyone's company is constantly making a better product each year after year, there's also new products entering the market each year that can solve pain points that before maybe there wasn't a technology solution for it, and now there is. And so there's always new ideas out there. All finance and accounting teams are constantly getting more efficient as they're absorbing more and more complexity and operational burden.
And what I love about that is it almost suggests that, like, regardless of the market condition, you need to have a culture of change, right? You need to embrace it changing, improving, and looking at things in new ways, because that will always pay dividends versus saying, well, if things are getting tough, we just need to lean into what we're already doing. It's like, no, things are getting tough. It's all the more reason to invest in change, because if you're stagnant, you'll have a higher likelihood of failure, right? Like, and that's been my experience, going back to the Great Recession, is companies that tried to be stagnant really suffered a lot versus companies that were willing to still make a bet in the recession saw tremendous growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at some of the ones that came out of it really well, Salesforce jumps out. My own experience was at Adobe. And so it gave us the opportunity. We're looking at, I think the stock price was all the way down to $17 or $19 for Adobe at the time. Should have been a great time to invest. But it really gave Adobe the chance to look at things and step back and say, we've considered switching from selling $2,500 boxes of software to a more cloud subscription model. Let's give that a lot harder look now. Like, let's take a chance on that. And so it didn't happen exactly during the recession, but the initial decisions to say, this is something we should really consider. Now we need to really come up with a plan for it. Let's actually do this. Were some of the inflection point was seeing what was going on with that perpetual business model during the recession.
Right. And I think what's interesting about that is a lot of big tech giants outside of Adobe had to follow the same path, like Microsoft with Microsoft 365 came out, if I'm not mistaken, a little bit after Adobe went to subscription. And you just saw a lot of the tech giants say, listen, like, the old model doesn't work, and we got to change now or we're really going to fall behind. And, I think had Microsoft not made that play to 365, they'd probably be feeling more pressure from the G Suite than they are, which they already, have some pressure there. But I think it's really important. And so I love that timing of saying, Rick, maybe it doesn't change during the recession. Maybe you're not making a plan to have this change occur during uncertain times, but it is a good time to review and reflect and say, if we survive this, where do we want to go? Right. And not just hope that the storm passes, but plan to say, well, what are we going to do when we come out of it is really, really powerful and impactful. Kind of taking it a little bit more into your teams. You mentioned a little bit about, hey, if we had 20% less resources next year, how do we still execute this thing? And looking at how your conversations have shifted internally, what have you kind of allocated as maybe, initiatives or strategies or to-dos to your controller, your corporate controller, and whoever's leading, your director of finance?
Yeah. I'll back up a little bit on that and talk to the first point on what finance teams in general do. I
Mhm.
really believe that when people are concerned, whether it's a macro event like people are predicting right now, or whether it's just an individual company kind of going through tougher times, it's really the chance for finance teams to shine. It's
Mhm.
the bad finance teams aren't going to do anything. They'll keep doing what they're doing. They're going to have misaligned investments, high cash burn, company won't do well. Average finance teams, and this is what you're going to see common across most finance teams, is I don't know how to stop this. We're just going to stop everything, stop all spending. We'll figure it out over the next couple of years. And I'd say that's average and pretty common. The great finance teams are the ones that really understand the drivers within the business, where the most value is created and where the least value is created. And they don't stop everything. They stop and pull back in certain areas, but they keep going in the areas that are driving the most value. And so when you see that happen, this is a great chance for finance teams to say, "Hey, everybody, let's actually critically look at everything we're investing in and see." No one makes the right choice 100% of the time. There's bad
Right.
investments in every
Right.
company, and it's your chance to kind of correct some of those. And so that's something that every team needs to do, whether you're doing it for the whole company or even just for your own team. And what you'll find is that the great companies come out of that having made the right scalable technology investments that modernize either their product tech stack or their go-to-market tech stack or their G&A tech stack, and are able to scale really well as things recover for the company. And so when you think about what teams need to do, they have to keep in mind that where will we be in 3 years? Maybe you're expecting to be there in 2 years. Now it's 3 or 4 years. Either way, that's still the end goal. And
Right.
what are the investments you need to get there? And then within that, what you'll find, I think the really good finance teams do is they make those bets that have really quick ROIs. So they say,
Right.
I know this thing pays for itself in 6 months for a year. As you were saying, it's the right bar, it's the right hurdle, it's a good investment. We're going to do this no matter what.
Yeah.
And then the ones that there's less certainty around, maybe that year-long implementation or that 3 or 4 year tech project, that one you can probably wait a year or two and say, okay, that one I'm not going to do because
Right.
the payback period is so far out. I don't have visibility there anymore with
Right.
with
Or I don't
uncertainty.
have cash to support that like long investment. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really like that last point you made where it's like the time to value becomes much more important when you're looking at any investment, whether that's a tech stack investment or any kind of internal process investment. It's that time to value is a little bit more critical. So whether you can get that return in 3 months, immediately, a year, whatever it is, um, that becomes a little bit more important when you have a different cash burn cycle, right? And you're not sure, and we're not going to get into like, hey, this is how you change your debt structure, your cap table, whatever it is. But regardless, you got to manage that cash a little bit more. Cash is king. And so it becomes important to consider that and not try and make these big bets, but make quick, decisive ones that help you scale. And I think, it kind of goes back to when if you kind of look at the growth curve coming out of recessions a lot of times, and again, not an economist, so don't quote me on anything, but from my personal experience, the companies, and it sounds like you're saying this, companies that position themselves well to ride that wave on when it comes out really see the most overall growth, which makes sense because they're able to take they're essentially able to capitalize on it earlier than the ones that have just tried to weather the storm, come out of it, and now have to pivot to try and take that scale that's happening in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's no better example of that than in headcount and talent. If you look at the companies, I gave examples of like the bad, the average, and the good.
Mhm.
The good ones are already ahead of the plan on what they need and when they need it. So in the tough times, the good ones are going to be able to scoop up the top talent that becomes available that maybe was out of the company that didn't have the right overall plan. And so they're going to be better positioned to ride that curve when things pick back up.
Hmm.
The ones who failed to invest in technology and had too many headcount and just froze everything, um, the good talent's going to see when things are mismanaged, they're going to leave. And since things are frozen, they're going to be left with some of the lesser talent.
Yeah.
And trying to scale off lesser talent's always helpful. So I think we talked about this the last time I was on. I'm a huge believer in having the absolute best tools so you can retain the best talent,
Hmm.
and that will attract more great talent. And I think the companies that do continue to invest in the right tools for their team and find a way to fit that in with their current trajectory are going to be much better positioned to hire and retain talent coming out of any uncertainty.
Right. And I think, and we're not here to talk about the great resignation today, which is, a lot of the, even going into like turbulent market times, and there has been layoffs in the marketplace, there's still a big talent retention crunch that people are facing. So, you're not always able to get your best. So at least give them the tool that helps that person perform at their best is really important. And I've, even in my own experience, we had at Kodiak Cakes, there was a certain individual we were really excited about hiring to our team. They were on the fence because it was kind of a lateral move for them, and we couldn't offer them better than that. But because we had, in particular, Flowcast, not to plug us, but because of the tech stack we were using in Flowcast, they were very excited to, they're like, okay, that was a plus in our column to get them onboarded. And it was part of our package to try and recruit this person. So, it has become more important to people to have the correct support at the company they go to, because people just don't want to go to a place and be miserable. Why trade in being miserable at place A to be miserable at place B? There's no real point in it. So I do think what you're saying is something I've seen play out in my career as well, is just giving them the right tools to succeed. I want to take it a step back to something you said earlier with working with different leaders in the departments, and how it becomes, kind of what I was hearing is it's in uncertain conditions, and not knowing whether you're going to have budgets cut, or you're going to have to force cost cuts. The different business leaders outside of finance and accounting, this isn't their area of expertise. They're good at executing some kind of operational process, but maybe the analysis and understanding how to do that cost cut, how to invest, isn't really their strength. And this is a time where finance can be such a critical ally, is kind of what I was hearing, to these different functional leaders inside the organization, to help them kind of figure out, okay, what do I need to do in operations, or what do I need to do in marketing, or what do I need to do in sales or sales ops to support the business, because I'm not good at modeling. Modeling isn't my background, but your finance team can really come in there and support, and your accounting team can really come in there and say, okay, if you let us know what you need to report on, we'll help grab that data and we'll get you that clean reporting. Is that kind of what that's kind of what I heard you were saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it ties into earlier. Things are getting more and more complex, specifically for controllers, especially. And I think the way they've been solving it, some of it's just been solving with more and more people to do more work, but a
Mhm.
lot of others have been solving it with improving their tech stack. And so when you improve that tech stack, a lot of times the way that's solved is not just touching the accounting team, it's touching other teams, whether that be sales and sales ops, deal desk, different teams within AP or the broader company across vendor management. And when you solve things with technology, that means there's other people using it, there's other stakeholders. And when you actually need to improve something, that means you can't make decisions in silos. So you need your accounting leadership to be able to go and engage those other stakeholders to convince them why something is so valuable and so important that we need to do it. And so an example I'll use is when companies are cash strapped, they often start looking at every dollar going in and every dollar going out. And if you can look at your days sales outstanding and your AR balance and bring that down, that helps your cash flow quite a bit. Uh, but the way to engage in that is really has to have a leadership that can go out to the sales leadership and help them understand why 180-day payment terms might not be great, or
Right, right.
why accounting needs their help to say, I'm just getting pushed to an AP email within the company. Can you engage the customer so that they can help get this payment in on time? And so
Mhm.
when you have that type of relationship and influential leadership from your finance team, you can accomplish a lot of these other things that will help with cash flow that you couldn't accomplish in a silo by yourself.
And that's something that and I don't know who coined this, but the my old CFO Nate Lord used to call it the economic engine, and I think it's the best description. But he used to talk about the economic engine. It's really, accounting and finance need to go to the broader organization during times like this and help them understand where they affect the economic engine, right? And that then will hone back into your cash conversion cycle, but helping sales understand how they affect that cash conversion cycle and how they affect the economic engine, helping people that maybe your operational side, and if you're a tech company, oftentimes that's maybe your marketing team, understand where the way they structure payment terms and when they have to pay vendors also affects that cash conversion cycle and that economic engine. Really is more important than ever, is creating that financial literacy in the company. And as it's been said, accounting is the language of business. So making helping people understand that language is really, really key and important. Are there other looking at your team, are there other projects or undertakings you would delegate to your accounting and finance teams right now, outside of saying, hey, we think we need to run an A/B parallel of like best case and worst case scenario, and let's try and cut down 20%. Let's plan for 20% reduction and see what we can do there.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that we focus on a lot that often is kind of a next level need is the optionality of certain decisions. And so what I mean by that is that, let's say you want to expand into a new country and it's going to cost you X dollars, and that's how much it costs to expand in that one country. Would you pay 20% more if then that could actually support 3 or 4 countries with that expansion project?
Mhm.
And so then you have to constantly think about not just your next year's plan, but your 3 or 4 year out plan. And
Mhm.
what's the most efficient way to get there? And what are the odds I'm going to need to expand to 3 countries? Would I pay that 20% upfront to do that? And so the optional, once you kind of have that baseline scenario, the optionality one is really important. But but I also think it's continuing to look at leading indicators. So I'll go back to payment terms and days sales outstanding. There's all this investment in product and go-to-market tech stacks, trying to predict which customers are doing well, which ones are doing bad, which ones are going to churn. And a lot of times your accounting team will have insights on that just based on how the contract was negotiated.
Yeah.
That customer negotiating really weird payment terms and really weird other things. If you look at that trend over time, do they have a higher likelihood of not paying or a higher likelihood of churning after 1 year? And
Mhm.
so a lot of times that language of the business can have insights that don't exist anywhere else because the data only exists within the finance team.
That's a really interesting way to look at it, and not something I've heard before. I really like that, where it's like, by reading in between the lines of what people are saying with their payment terms or how they're trying to structure deals, might give you a lot of insight to how they're doing financially. That doesn't reflect in the financials that they're sending over to you when you do like a credit worthiness, right? Like credit worthiness might look fine today, but those financials might be 4 months old, or from last quarter or whatever it is. So you're maybe not getting today's look and find out that, well, hey, they had a really tough business decision. Maybe they had to pay a contracted dividend that was very large that you didn't see in the financials or wasn't disclosed to you. And all of a sudden they're in a cash crunch, and they might churn. I think that's a really good and interesting way to kind of look at, especially tech and doing contracts. Is this going to be a good customer? Is this going to be a good business? Or are we chasing something that we shouldn't right now? That is super insightful. And I liked what you said too about that optionality. It's like, listen, not everybody can make the correct decision. You don't know where you're going to be in 2 to 4 years. But if you run your best case and your conservative best case, your conservative worst case scenarios, it can kind of tell you where you think you're going to land, and then you can compare your optionality to that. Is really critical to making those future bets, right? The average team is the one that just says, well, I know what we can do today. But the great finance team is the one that's looking at that next step, that optionality, and saying, well, even worst case scenario, paying 20% now to be able to land in 4 countries in 2 years is actually going to, pay us a dividend. And you might be wrong. Things might come in worse than you thought, but you made an educated decision, and that's what the expectation is, right? Some are going to land, some aren't, but if you land a couple of those, they'll pay off with a couple that didn't.
I know it's really hard. I know it's not a fun task, but doing the 3 to 5 year plans will make those 1 year decisions so much easier. If you're really only planning 6 months to 12 months ahead of time, you'll never see the value in optionality. You'll always cut it, and it'll always be something that means that the next year's a scramble because you have nothing in place for the 2024 objectives.
Yeah.
By the time you're done with 2023.
Yeah. And what, to me, it seems like there's this undertone message of, reporting and the velocity of reporting, or the time you can get reporting, it really becomes key in uncertain times. Is that, would you say that's true in your experience, that, it's like, hey, you can kind of get away maybe with that 10-day close when things are good, because, no matter what, your bets are always landing, right? You're on a hot streak. Things are going great. But when things aren't going well, you really need to be able to pivot quickly. And the velocity of that financial information, both from a reporting perspective and a planning perspective, becomes that much more critical.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd argue it's just as important anytime there's a big shift or change, whether that's up or down. But human nature is a lot more forgiving of not making the right investments and leaving some growth on the table than it is, leaving investments that are bad on the table for too long and having too much burn and not being able to right size them. So, in a perfect world, they're both equally important, but we always value a little bit more the downside, especially because, going to 0-0 and running out of cash is running out of cash. So I think that velocity is extremely important, because you can't make really good decisions until you see what you did last month or last week. And 10 days is generous. That there's a lot of companies still in that 20 to 30 day close cycle. And by the time the let's use the September results come out, you're already in November and no one cares anymore. So I think real-time actions is a buzzword for a good reason. People want to be able to see data in real time. And it's on the finance and accounting teams. It's a pipe dream to have everything in real time all the time.
Right.
The important thing is to pick out which ones that you actually are going to make decisions off of data, and get that as quick and reliable as possible, and constantly be improving that. So whether that's top line, whether that's margin, whether that's cash and spend, all those are pretty critical metrics for finance teams. And a lot of those are driven by things further up the funnel, whether that be product usage data or pipeline data, et cetera. So, I completely agree. The faster people in our roles love making database decisions. And if the data is not available or the data is old, it's a lot harder to make data informed decisions.
Right. And, you said something, that just now you just said something that really, made me think is, well, one, if it takes you 10 days or 30 days to do your close, you're really setting up your finance team for failure. As an accounting function, you're not supporting your, brother in arm, your comrade, your finance department, if you're making them wait 10 days to do their analysis, right? It makes it incredibly hard for them to pivot and give the actionable information they need to the broader organization. So if you want to be a good business partner just to your own function, regardless of anybody else, you really got to get that information as soon as possible, or else they're using bad data to make, to hopefully have people have good decisions, which doesn't work that way. So think of it, that's one way to think about it. But that last thing you said, where it's like, focus on the driver. So, if top line is really important, well, if you can give that on day one, you might not be done with the close, but orient your processes to focus on those drivers for the close, to get that information to finance, and so they can start their process earlier, right? So just pull that forward a little bit. So it's like, if they need revenue, well, I'll finish revenue day one as early on day one as possible, and they can give some answers there on what's happening. then focus on your cost of sales or your cost of goods sold so that they can go into margin and they can give that analysis. And then, G&A and the other things can kind of wait till after that. A little less important, department heads are working on those, but focus on those drivers that, and your contribution margin numbers. And then even if your close is still taking a while because of other accruals, at least people are able to make some of their decisions earlier. And I think that's a great way to kind of look at if you're trying to uplift during this time and say, well, how do I increase my financial velocity? What you just said, Razak, is the way to do it. Orient it towards your drivers.
Yeah. I think that's the challenge for accounting leadership a lot of times, is to figure out which the main drivers are and how they can achieve it. I was talking to a dear friend one time about his close and how he could speed it up. And so naturally the first question was, what was the long pole in the tent? Mm-hmm. And it turns out it was, very small teams, MBO, bonus accrual that was based on some other data that, at the end of the day, the max range it could have been was between $12,000 and $14,000. And
yep.
So it was on him to figure out, like, at what point can I get this materially right? Close and move on, and working with my auditors to make sure it's okay. And all of a sudden that long pole in the tent's gone. So his tech stack allowed him to see that close and that long pole in the tent. Mm-hmm. But that's the challenge, to figure out the happy medium where it's accurate enough to pass the audit, but fast enough that the business can make decisions on it.
Right. And I think that's a great thing to remember, is that, what is materially important and what's materially accurate. A lot of times people get hung up because they, by nature, accountants, we're so conservative, we're so specific in what we do that we just want to have the right number or not at all. But it's like, guys, if it lands within this range, it really doesn't affect business decisions, but it does affect the process and the timing of it. So, put a worst case scenario number down, true it up next month. It's not the end of the world, and move on, and you should be good to go. And that's another great tactic to kind of help, drive that velocity so people can make their decisions. I guess where I kind of want to go last with our conversation is, as you said, it's really stressful for everybody, right? And there's a lot more pressure on the office of the CFO and everybody, all the leaders within it. Are there any things you do, and this is a little bit from left field, so I apologize for this, but is there anything you do to try and keep motivation up on your team? I know you mentioned that having the right tech stack is really important in having that there. Are there any other kind of little tactical takeaways that you do to try and keep, like, Greg happy day to day?
Yeah. Greg's pretty senior, so he's pretty self-sufficient on that. I think the things are really having that full visibility. If people can see the path to the 3-year plan, they feel a whole lot less worried about their future, and they know we've thought about it and we know we've got it in place. I would say the focus there needs to be a lot more on the individual contributors, especially the entry-level employees in the accounting org, to make sure that they see that same path and they have that same confidence in the go forward plan. Uncertainty sucks for all of us, but it's way more of a weight and burden for people who do not have 7 or 10 years on their resume that they feel confident they can go get another great job. They don't have that large emergency cash fund because they're still early in their careers. Yeah. And so I think where that focus needs to be is mostly on the individual contributors in the org, so that they have visibility on what your plan is. They feel like, I see it, I understand it. It's not a black box that I hope everything works out in. And so one of the things that I'm really happy we do here at Flowcast is very transparent on our P&L, our forecast, our 3 and 5 year plans. And we share them a lot in the all hands, but also anybody can come ask anytime. And I think that inspires a lot of confidence, and the motivation that we aren't stopping the investment level on technology. So we're still rolling out a whole bunch of new enhancements to our CFO tech stack that will make people's lives easier on automating some of the manual work, and also freeing up their time to either do the new objectives we have next year or new cool projects that we haven't done before. So I think those are the 2 things I'd focus on there.
I love it. I think I really like that, focusing on the individual that doesn't have that financial literacy, doesn't have the experience of maybe going through a recession before, uncertain market times, and not just being candid when they ask a question, but being proactive in searching them out and saying, here's what's going on. What do you understand? What do you not understand? And then being candid with them. And that is something that, I've really enjoyed at Flowcast, is the all hands, and when you and Mike go up there and the other business leaders say, this is what is happening, and you can ask me any question in front of anybody and we will answer it, right here. And if we need to hunt something down, we will hunt it down and we'll let everybody know. That candidness is really important, but that upfront and like hunting the people down, saying, no, I know you probably don't understand this and I want you to understand, is really great advice and just really great leadership. That I'll learn from that for sure. I really like that comment. And then I love how you kind of brought it back to something you said earlier, and we've discussed before, that you got to keep investing because you're still betting on the future. We will come out of recession. Things will be fine if something happens. But no matter what the uncertain market terms are today, whether recession happens or not, you got to keep investing in your future and sticking back to those principles that, if you go internally and you set your IRR and you set your hurdle rate, and your ROI analysis says it's better than that, then invest in it. Like don't question it. Look at your time to value, look at your cash. I can be like, if it checks the box, it checks the box. Don't second guess yourself. You're only going to make it worse. The principles are there for a reason, and they will steer you through a storm. And so I think that's another great thing to remind people is trust your principles, trust those instincts that you've had. Razak, it has been a pleasure to have you. Really, truly, I've learned a lot on this podcast. Very fortunate that I no longer have to go through this by myself. That's on yours and Greg's shoulders. But, I do think I'm very excited to have you at the helm here at Flowcast as we kind of navigate any future storms. And thank you so much for joining us on Blood, Sweat, and Balance Sheets.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a great podcast. I always feel very lucky to be able to join whenever I do. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Razak. Have a good one.